Hey everybody, this is Isabelle Stone again. I am back after our. It's been a week since I posted my first podcast, and if you are still with me from then, thank you very much. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I am so glad to have y'all here. I hope y'all are doing well. Um, this time, my podcast, I wanted to talk about genres and categories. Now, everybody looks at genre and categories, they're like, well, they're the same thing. Well, they're not really. Okay. There is a difference between a genre and a category. The genre is what everyone automatically assumes both things are. There's romance, supernatural, historical, sci fi, horror. Those are the general genres you come about. And that's usually what people define a book or poem or short story by, is the genre. And of course, everyone knows romance, it's a love story. Okay. You've got uh, thrillers and suspense, they're pretty much just horror stories. And you've got supernatural, that's where you get into the whole werewolf, vampire, goblin, fairy, whatever it is. And I honestly really enjoyed those personally more than all the other books that I have found. I really love the supernaturals, and they don't have to be romantic. It can just be supernatural thriller, supernatural drama. There doesn't need to be romance in it for me to actually latch onto. Um, and so you have that, and then you get into the historical, which is period pieces. Now, period pieces is a term that usually people that are like avid readers or have been writing for a long time will be able to connect with. A period piece means like Victorian era, an old Western. It's just something that's not happening right now, which I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's different than the futuristic. That this is stuff that's from the past. Like, say it's a book where someone opens a journal and is reading a journal from like their great grandmother, and it's all about what's in that journal. That's considered a historical piece because you see mostly everything from what's happening inside the journal, not what's happening outside of it. And so those are your general genres you see. Um, I haven't really dabbled much with the whole fantasy aspect of it. Um, I have heard, though, that there is a really good fantasy slash historical romance by Jenna Moresi, and it is called The Savior's Champion. Now, I have not read this book myself, but I've heard wonderful things about it. And I urge you, if you are into that whole fantasy, historical romance, then you should really check it out. Um, I can say fantasy wise, I am a Harry Potter fan. and I have been since I was a little kid. I love J.K. Rowling stuff. And that's pretty much the only fantasy type thing you would see on my bookshelf. And it's just because my mother started reading to me Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as a bedtime story when I was a little girl. And it just started from there. I have all the Harry Potter books. I actually, for Christmas, my husband bought me a lot of Harry Potter stuff. Like I have a statue of Buckbeak on my shelf and one of the chocolate frogs, and I actually have Hermione's wand and the a wand stand from Slytherin, which I thought was really, really cool. But so back on to topic, so we've covered the genres, and there are probably even more genres than that. But what I really wanted to talk about was these categories, because they can get very, very confusing. And what you got to remember about the categories is based off of who is going to be reading this, not who is in it. Okay, so that makes it can get very confusing. Like, for instance, here's a example. We've got the Twilight series. Okay, Twilight series follows around a 17-year-old girl who falls in love with a vampire, is attacked multiple times, has a best friend that's a werewolf. There's a gruesome scene somewhere in there where she has a horribly grotesque birthing a half vampire child, and all of this stuff goes on, and you look at it, and just by hearing that, without actually knowing what these categories actually mean, personally, I would think that's an adult book. But I was actually very shocked. I read the first Twilight book because someone let me borrow it. And then I went to look for more because I was intrigued, and I searched all through Barnes & Noble looking for this book. And I had to go ask someone where to find it. And the fact is, I was looking in the wrong section because the store is sectioned off based off of the category. So if you're looking in the wrong category, you're not going to find what you're looking for. And I was very shocked to find out that it was considered one of the newer categories, which would be young adult. Which, you look at the categories, we've got, a lot of people don't touch on these, but there's elementary school, which is pretty much very obvious by looking at the book that it's elementary school. There's middle school, young adult, new adult, and adult. Okay, so you wonder, what does this mean? What does this category actually mean? Well, it focuses in on who is your target audience. And the target audience literally means you look at the book and you decide by looking at it, who is going to want to read this? Who is more likely to read this? And it starts out with, well, elementary, the elementary category is obvious. It's for kids that are, younger than 12. That's where you get elementary. Wait, no. No, it's not younger than 12. I'm sorry. That it's younger than 8. Okay. So basically, from the point where you start learning how to read until you're 8 years old. So between 5 and 8, because you start in elementary school, you start learning how to read stuff at that age. And those are the books where you see Dr. Seuss, where the words are really, really big and there's lots of pictures. So it's not really something that's very hard to determine that that is what that is. It's usually the ones on the side of the book. It says like first readers or first grade readers, second grade readers, third grade readers. And that is elementary. And it's very easy to pinpoint when you're at the library or at a Barnes and Noble. And then you have the middle school. Okay, now what is middle school? Middle school, just by looking at the book, sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. It all depends on the kind of book cover that it has. Not a lot of them will say on the outside that there's something there. Like, I believe, someone can correct me on this, because I haven't read the book all the way through, but I'm just guessing that this would be considered middle school, which is the book by J. Asher, 13 Reasons Why. And, yes, the book surrounds a 16-year-old girl that she ended up killing herself, but the point of which, where I see that it would mostly impact middle schoolers, is the fact that it surrounds things that kids in middle school deal with. And it's sad that they have to deal with it, which is mainly bullying. Bullying is the biggest thing about 13 Reasons Why. And of course I haven't gotten through all of it. I'm hoping to get through all of it. I know there's some big differences between the show on Netflix and the book. And I've been told that many times, don't trust the show. And I've been told that by people who read this book when they were in middle school. Okay, so that's another reason why I say that this is a middle school category. One of my editors actually told me that she read it when she was 8 years old. But she read it with the help of her mother. And I looked at the language used in there and the well, not really the grammar, more the way that J. Asher wrote it. He wrote it in a way that's not overly descriptive, so I really think a middle school kid could keep up with it. So there's my example of middle school. I don't really have anything else in my house that would be middle school. My eldest is 6 years old. She's about to start first grade as soon as the schools open up again. So I don't really have that kind of material in my house. But after middle school, you come on to young adult. Now, here's something that's very, very specific about young adult. Okay, young adult means your target audience is between the ages of 12 and 17 years old. Okay, let's look at that. So, I have noticed that some people have kind of blurred the lines of what is young adult and what is new adult. For one thing, I'll bring back this example. Twilight. I do not personally believe that belongs in young adult. I believe that it belongs in new adult. And no, it has nothing to do with the whole fact that there's a tiny little sex scene in there. That's not even a sex scene. That is what you would call a love scene, where all you see being written about is emotions and everything, and you don't talk about action. That is a love scene. Means a love scene means that a love scene means that you're just talking about it. There is no real actual there's no detail about the context. It leaves you to guess about what's going on. You don't get any confirmation. That makes it a love scene, and that, yes, makes it age appropriate for between the ages of 12 and 17. Now, I really honestly don't think any 12-year-olds, or at least I hope so, considering my daughter's halfway to to being a 12-year-old, that they don't talk about or think about sex. Now, I know when you get closer to the middle of there is when you start getting at least girls thinking and talking about that. But I don't think there are 12-year-olds that would actually be thinking about that. And no, that's not the point of me thinking that this book doesn't belong in young adult. I believe it belongs in new adult because of the gruesome, grotesque scenes you find in the final book. The point of which giving birth, I honestly don't think that was age appropriate for a 12-year-old to be reading this. But of course, I don't have any say in it. I'm not the author. I'm not the person that published it. It's just my personal opinion. But that book is considered to be young adult. I have a good example right here. Let me just grab this book because I see it on my shelf and I know it's a perfect example of young adult. There's a book. It's of course a book about a teenage girl trying to work through her emotions after she ends up sharing a kiss with her best friend. So this book, it has to deal with, of course, her coming into herself, which is a big deal about young adult, figuring out who she is and figuring out what kind of people she wants to be with, whether she decides that, she is a lesbian, if she's bisexual, or if this kiss with her best friend meant absolutely nothing to her. And that's what this whole book is about, and I absolutely loved it growing up. It's called Kissing Kate by Lauren Miracle. And I really thought that was a perfect example of young adult. And it was actually a book I got from my high school, which makes it a really good example because they actually distributed this in high school. And I know a lot of people are like, no, we shouldn't be letting our children read stuff like that. But you know what? Kids are going to decide who they are going to be with. And sometimes it's not even a decision. Sometimes it just chooses you. And you got to kind of let them be who they're going to be, okay? But so that is young adult. Now, when we get to new adult, okay, I've got a perfect example here. And I'm going to apologize right here because this is one thing that you will hear me rant and rave about anytime it comes up in one of my podcasts. So I'm going to apologize right here in case this is something you just absolutely do not agree with and just don't want to hear, so I am sorry. But the perfect example of a new adult book would be 50 Shades of Grey. And you ask, why 50 Shades of Grey? It's obviously adult. Well, it's not. New adult literally means you are learning to be on your own. You are a new adult. In the book of 50 Shades of Grey, Anna is just graduating college. And she is going off. She's starting her first... can't remember correctly if it was her first relationship or her first real relationship. She's starting her first real relationship, and okay, I have got to kind of throwing out an air hug here to E.L. James. I am so thankful for her being one of the first fan fiction authors to be able to publish their fan fiction, change it around enough to where they were able to publish it. And I'm so glad she was able to do that, because that's what I'm doing. I'm not saying which one of my books used to be a fan fiction. I am not going to tell y'all that. Y'all can just guess all you want. But I do have some books that are going to be like that. But E.L. James, I honestly believe from reading the 50 Shades of Grey series that she had nothing to do with the BDSM lifestyle, or even spoke to someone that did. I know many people that are like that have those kind of relationships, and she completely misrepresented it. And that's something that I really am trying not to do with Dominating Like Xander. I do not want to misrepresent the way things are, which is very hard to do, writing a romance and not misrepresenting something like that, which is different than what she did with 50 Shades of Grey. Because 50 Shades of Grey, that is actually something that can be very beautiful. The kind of relationships that she brought up, I understand that she was trying to express how Christian was, and she did a good job in some parts. In some parts, I know a lot of personal people that read it and just wanted to burn the book. And it was just because they were so offended by the misrepresentation. And the misrepresentation also brought a lot of people into that lifestyle that were what are now called fakes. And they are people that are just into it for the kink. And that is a big, big issue, because you have people in that lifestyle that are looking for real partners, not someone to delve into the kink with. And that's something that really gets to me. But the fact is, 50 Shades of Grey was a new adult book where you followed Anna on her journey to becoming an adult. And yes, she was already an adult, but becoming an adult in the way she was, and her journey of, I'm just now graduating college, to I have a career, I'm a wife, I'm a mother. And that's what makes it a really good example for new adult. Now, we've covered elementary, middle school, young adult, and new adult. And that leaves one other category. What's the one other category? Our last category is adult fiction. What is adult fiction? Well, adult fiction is what you generally find, which is where it follows someone in their late 30s to early 40s. But usually what it means is that it is something that an older adult is going to want to read, someone in their 30s and 40s. And so what separates it is that adult fiction is you've already transferred. The person in the book has already completely become an adult. They have their own career, family, or maybe they don't have a family. Maybe they've decided that they don't want to have children, and they just want to have their significant other and have their career, and this is them living their life. That is where you get to the part of adult fiction. Now, I'm going to put this in there for y'all to think of. The fact that erotica, and yes, erotica, fiction with sex in it, with a lot of sex in it. Like, I'm going to use an author I know, for example, Carly Phillips. She is an erotic romance novelist. And she was actually the first one I ever read her stuff, and I was not expecting to find sex in there. I was 17 years old, and I was like, oh my God, what the heck am I reading? But she is, most of her stuff follows someone in their 30s. Maybe they're going through a divorce, or they just happen, chance encounter between two people, and she creates the storyline in that area. She would be considered, her category would be adult fiction, because she does it so, she's so good. I just have to praise her, because I don't find her books very much. Need to remind some people that I mostly shop in half-price books, or I shop on Kindle. Those are the two places I find my books. And that's actually where I found Carly Phillips. Her book called Fantasy Island. Yeah, Fantasy Island was actually the first erotic romance I ever read. At least that's what they used to be called when I first started reading them. Now they've transferred to just being romance, because that was back when there was no new adult fiction, or at least not that you could see a part in the bookstores. You just had elementary, middle school, young adult, adult. And those were all you seemed to have. And you would find her an adult. And there are a lot of authors like that. But a lot of people have a hard time distinguishing young adult and new adult, and that's where we get a little confusing, because their age ranges are right next to each other, and they're kind of hard to like pull apart from each other. And one big difference that I've found that you usually find in these kind of stories is the way to tell a new adult from a young adult is, a lot of the time the new adult, it's gonna have I'm changing it. It's not a lot of the time, is one way that you can distinguish it is you tend to find graphic sexual activity in the new adult versus the young adult. You will find graphic violence, graphic drug use and alcoholism. Usually in young adult, they skim over it. Like, for instance, with Breaking Dawn, the final book in the Twilight series, you see that they skim over the sexual scene. I found it very strange that they didn't skim over the birth scene. That's like, I hadn't had children myself at the time when I read this, so I was pretty innocent-minded of the graphicness. So the first time I read it, I almost puked. But you have books like that, and they're put into the wrong genre. I really think she should have stuck it in new adult, just because of that, very least that one book. Because that was just, I don't think a 12-year-old could have handled that. But, let's see. Is there anything else to talk about? Okie dokie. yeah, I believe that is it. Thank you guys for listening. I will keep y'all posted on when Dominating Like Xander and Backroads are going to be published. I just got a text from one of my editors. He has just told me that they are in the middle of finishing up Dominating Like Xander. So yay! They've both already got book covers. I've got to get Dominating Like Xander sized correctly for the book cover. Need to make sure the book cover is actually right for the width of the spine. And I've got to turn it into an ebook for all of my readers that are going to be reading it on their phones like they should be. If there's anybody that wants to be added to the mailing list for Rosebud Publishing, just shoot me a quick email at submissions@rosebudpublishing.net. That was submissions@rosebudpublishing.net. And if you have any a manuscript or poems or any writing material that you would like to have published, go ahead and send that over and we'll all take a look at it. All right. Thank you very much for joining me today. Goodbye.